situation because the responsibility for provision of education and school structures has been devolved to local authorities. So how do you ensure the national guidance is delivered through 22 local authorities? But I guess that in terms of the amount of local authorities we have, there's a debate for another day and probably another research paper. But as you said, you're open to questions and comments. Has anybody got any questions or comments at all? I've got one if nobody else has. What's next for this report, and what's next for you as an organisation?
I know what I would like to do, and that is, and this would involve actually a lot of cooperation from local authorities and perhaps from people who might not want those actual facts investigated. During the last 8 years, quite a lot of primary schools have been closed in Wales. Some of them long enough ago that we can actually investigate what has happened. And I would very much like to know, as I say, in Huff we believe in small schools. We're not scared of research. We are in fact fairly confident that any research that is done ultimately will at least show that there is very little advantage in closing small schools, maybe advantages in keeping them open. But one of the things we should be looking at in great detail is past experience. There's a lot of past experience now, and as far as we can find out, none of it has been looked at. So I would like to see people actually looking and saying, okay, these schools have been closed, these schools have been amalgamated. What happened? Did closure actually save money? Did it improve educational outcomes? Are people happy? Are the communities happy? That seems to be the largest, most important area. Obviously the other things like transport costs, we don't know. We really don't know what would be involved. But it ought to be possible to predict. But I think looking at the experience that is already accumulated very, very seriously is the thing I would like to see about public schools.
The fundamental lack of work and research into these policies.
Just doesn't seem to have been done. Or if it has been done, the results have not been released, which is another possibility.
Any other questions or comments?
Could I add to that? I mean, I think there are two particular areas that we're interested in, as well as the costs. And one is the impact of a size of school on pupil attainment. And we have carried out some preliminary work on that, which seems to suggest that the size of school doesn't bear any relation to pupil attainment. And then the other one, which is much more tricky, I think, is what is the impact of school closures on communities? And that's much more difficult, I think, to research, but another important area.
Any other comments or questions?
Right, just Gareth Jones and Paul Conway, but I also chair the Enterprising Learning Committee, so I was keen to hear what you have to say about the politicians not scrutinising. I can assure you we do scrutinise the sort of the varying returns of statistics from different authorities. That is an area of concern, and we have been looking at that. And there are some improvements, but it may be, you're quite right, there is some way to go. But that inconsistency doesn't help. But I have to say, one of the most interesting features that you pointed out to us in that graph, you asked the question, well, do we need to close schools? Surely in that graph, the first attempt should be to try and improve the efficiency of schools. And we did mention that. I mean, the variance as you get just below 50 is from something like 2,000 up to 16,000 per pupil. Well, surely we need to get a grip with that and make sure that those schools are far more efficient.
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, if we're looking at that mass closure would give us only 2%, it's fairly clear that just looking and finding out where the efficiencies are in the efficient schools, there's actually one very interesting thing, and I didn't want to go into this looking at the individual LEA graphs, which are in the report, but on several of them, there is actually a secondary peak in the costs at around about 200 pupils. Now, whether that's just a statistical freak, but it does indicate that there must be efficiency savings in there somewhere. If a school with 200 pupils actually is costing more in that authority than schools with 100 pupils, that is something that people should be looking at very seriously if they're talking about saving money. Because if you can save £100 per pupil in a 200 pupil school, you're making as big a saving as you could by closing a couple of small schools.
Maybe that's something for us as a committee, you and Chair's committee to look into in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to add, John?
John Osmond from University of West Wales. Following up on the point you made earlier on, we did actually carry out a very small scale study a few years ago in which we examined 6 case studies of amalgamations of small schools. There were 3 in Paris, 3 in Cambridge. And the results that we found were that we looked at people, we asked people after the event, so to speak, how have things changed, worse or better, and on the whole people felt that the new dispensation was better. Having said that, I should say that these amalgamations took place in actually very small schools. The definition of small schools is something of a conundrum, as I recall these schools and people with less than 60. So a bit of research has been done to show.
Yes, this is the Reynolds report, which of course I'm aware of. And I have to say that I find it an unimpressive document. For instance, you talk about 6 schools, or 6 case studies. Now, one of those case studies was of 2 schools, an infant school and a junior school, which were amalgamated by knocking down a wall between them. And then the question was asked of the parents, did you find your transport costs increased? Unsurprisingly, the parents said, no, the transport difficulties and problems were exactly the same before we knocked the wall down as after we knocked the wall down. In other cases, I mean, it's not the small size of the sample. I mean, 6 schools should have given us quite a bit of information. It was the small size of the people that they talked to. I mean, for instance, in each school or in each sample, they looked at talking to 2 children in the school after the amalgamation. One of the children was deliberately selected to be from the school, the large school, which had received the children from the small schools. Unsurprisingly, when they asked a child from the school of 100 pupils, did you notice a big difference in the school when the pupils from this school of 12 pupils arrived? They said, no. So the big reservation I have about the Reynolds report, and I could go into his evidence in great detail, that the big reservation I have is that he produces these figures, he produces percentages where percentages are actually really not valid. And then, over and over again, how many times in the Reynolds report is the word overwhelming used? You cannot validly use the word overwhelming for a study based on not just such a tiny number of samples, because I think there's a number of samples that have been looked at in detail would have been not adequate, but at any rate significant. But the number of people that they actually interviewed, 2 pupils from each sample. And also, and this is looking at it statistically, there is one flaw in the Reynolds report, which is dealing with both parents and pupils. They looked at the parents and pupils after amalgamation. Now, in one case, it was a very small school, only 17 pupils. Only 11 pupils actually went to the new school, and only 11 pairs of parents were therefore involved in the subsequent analysis. So you're already dealing with a biased sample. You're dealing with a sample which is self-selected of the parents who are happy to send their children to the other school. We don't know anything about the parents who were not happy to send their children to that other school. So I have a lot of questions about the Reynolds report, but please don't think we've ignored it. We are well aware of it.
I mean, I understand the controversy about that, so it's just to say that, as you pointed out yourself, we need to offer research in this area. That we shouldn't do that.
No.
It's a far blatantly established.
I think we would both agree on that.
Josh, another comment or question?
I'm Gav Gums. I'm the Senior Manager of Central Services and House, School Modernisation and Online